You had 25 retained roles in like 4 months, if I remember right. Okay, how the hell do you actually do that?
So it was 2.5 years of actually building that trust and getting to know who were the right people for them to get them to their milestones of delivering incredible games.
How do you go about becoming basically friends and building that long-term relationship with your clients and your candidates?
Be interested in their story. Everybody has a story and everyone wants to tell their story.
You're the founder of a gaming recruitment business. How do we get to this point?
I worked in sales in the maritime industry. That didn't work out as planned, and I came back to the UK thinking, what next? Honestly, at the start of my career, if a client sent over a job, I'd jump onto it like a dog on a bone.
What do you feel is a better interview process?
It's one that is streamlined through speed. And even when there is no update that there is no update.
Yes, that is an update.
That is an update within itself.
What advice would you give for a gaming professional out of work now?
I think the first go-to place would be...
Welcome everyone back to the Playbook in a studio, which is very beautiful. I'm joined by Sel. Sel, how's it going?
Really good.
Really
Excited to kick this off for the first time.
Yes. I want to share the story of how we met. I thought it was quite cool. It was on LinkedIn and you sent me a message. Could you tell me what happened?
So it all started over dinner with some close friends, which didn't include Harry, funnily enough. So my best friend and I and his wife, my wife, went out for a meal, got talking about work, life, etc. And all of a sudden, gaming recruitment pops up with my friend's wife, and she mentions Harry's name. She said, "Oh, one of my cousins is involved in gaming recruitment." I was aware of Harry, given the amount of posts he was doing at the time, daily content. And she said, "Do you know Harry by any chance?" I said, "Well, I've seen his content. Is it this guy?" And before you knew it, it was Harry. Long story short, I sent a message across to you and said, "I'm at dinner with your cousin." So that's the story. And you were going to be in England the week after. What better way to meet in person over some wings in Soho?
Yes.
That's the story.
Yeah, and it was amazing. It was a lot of wings. We had an e-coffee before that, which is, I thought, really cool because I'm not sure if you did that often at the time.
No. In all truth, I'd have regular catch-ups with people. So from clients, candidates, friends, etc. But I'd never called it an e-coffee.
Yeah. So clients and candidates, like I was like since January doing e-coffees with pretty much anyone I would want to talk to, and no real agenda, but just vibing. And I found that super useful. And I thought, like when we did it for the first time, I don't know, I got a feeling it's like, oh, this is something different, you know. And then when we met in person, just kind of fast tracked that relationship very, very quickly. And then, yeah, we've been traveling a lot together. Pretty much, we went to Dubai together, and it's been really good. So I want to paint everyone a picture. So you're the founder of a gaming recruitment business. How do we get to this point? You've been in the industry for a while, so could you tell everyone like what's happened to get to this point?
The story goes back essentially 12 years when, prior to starting recruitment, I worked in sales in the maritime industry.
What's the maritime industry?
So, long story short, of the maritime industry, I worked for a business that designed and manufactured marine navigation systems. So I used to work alongside companies that ran fleets of oil tankers, petrol tankers, super yachts, etc. Whatever you needed for those oil tankers, yachts to be at sea, we provided that. So I was in the sales industry for several years, working with the Turkish market and actually Southeast Asian market. Did that for around 6-7 years, and I was given an opportunity to go out to Turkey to try a new venture, and that lasted around 9 months. Not all things work out, but the experience of leaving everything behind and going out to try something different outside of your comfort zone was something that I always wanted to do, essentially. So 9 months spent in Istanbul, and the biggest thing for me was relationships, the side of relationships, aside from the sales, was the most important thing for me. So that didn't work out as planned. And I came back to the UK thinking, what next? Having left a life behind to start from scratch in 2012, where could I essentially put my skills into? What do I love doing the most? Yes, the sales aspect keeps you motivated, and no 2 days is the same. But the most enjoyment I ever got was nurturing a relationship from the start to the end, which then turned into a friendship and also a long-lasting partnership. So you get onto the job boards. What do you do? Sales, relationships. The only thing that was popping up at the time was recruitment. So started applying. Before you knew it, I landed my first recruitment job with a company called the Huntress Group. I was brought on to look after IT contracts market. And to give you a bit of detail about that, I was responsible for building out entire software development teams that ranges from technical directors all the way down to architects, developers, project managers, businesses, anyone within a team to be able to build websites, back-end functions, etc. That was with 2 programming languages at the time, Microsoft.NET, C++. Did that for a couple of years. So that was around 2.5 years of actually learning the ropes of how to do recruitment. That was the most important thing for me. Having done that for 2.5 years, I then moved on to another company where I spent 5.5 years of building out a contracts team for them. And in a space where they hadn't had experience, they were predominantly working in audit, tax, and finance. They hadn't tapped into the IT market. So I went in there, built a desk from scratch, and worked with digital, media, interactive clients, again, to build out entire software development teams. So that's the beginning of my career. That was for around 8 years. And I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do my own thing. And when I say I wanted to do my own thing, I wanted to do it my way. Having worked in certain recruitment environments, which have been great, I also saw the bad side of it as well. So many recruitment companies in the UK are pretty short-sighted. People are used as commodities. It's very sales, KPI driven. And what I mean by short-sighted, it's about, how do I say this? It's all about maximizing profits. As with any business, you do need to bring in a profit. There's no other way of running a business. We all have to make money. But you could do it in an ethical way. You could do it in the right way without being short-sighted. So that's where the idea came up of, let me do something different, and I want to put the human touch into it. One of the things that we hear about the most in the recruitment industry is people being ghosted, because people get forgotten about, and you'll find that recruiters are only in continuous contact with those who have got the most chance of success, which then converts into revenue. So for me, it was about being in contact with every single person and just putting myself into the shoes of those people that were looking for work and trying to make a difference to their lives. So that was a vision. And from that, I got into a business partnership, set up my first business, which I ran for 3.5 years before selling the business in December.
And that was in games as well.
It was in games, and we hadn't had any gaming experience. It was by chance we fell into that industry.
And now?
And now, so 3.5 years of building my first business, which was completely new to me. I hadn't been in those territories before. So every move that I made was essentially new to me. Being able to work as a recruiter was second nature, but running a successful business, hiring, building a team, looking at things from a strategic perspective was all completely new. So I did that for 3.5 years, sold the business in December and took 3 months out. Having worked for almost 12 years in recruitment, I took 3 months out, and I am now the founder, director of the Pixel Movement.
Lovely. So I want to highlight a few things here. So with your experience, like from this podcast, we can cover the candidate side, the hiring manager side, and the developer side as well, the people working in studios, and like also people who like me, like running their own business. I think there's a lot of lessons we can get in. So I want to get into all three of these. I'm curious, like why did you name the company the Pixel Movement quickly?
The reason why I named the business the Pixel Movement is because having worked in the games industry and seeing how community led it was, I wanted to build a safe haven for the people that I was working with. Not only the developers, but as important as the developers are the people making the games. So for me, it was about bringing everyone closer and, as I said, creating a safe haven for people to be part of something. A lot of the times when you speak to candidates who are searching for their next gig, who have been outside of work for a long time, they seem lost and are not part of something. So for me, it was important to bring everyone closer together, connect everyone, but the most important thing for me is to give without the expectation of receiving. So for me, it's a movement, it's a community, and it's something that everyone can be a part of.
For sure. Awesome. So let's start with the hiring manager side. So you've been part of many processes, and as a recruiter, I found that really cool that we sometimes get the perspective where we can see 30 different studios and we can say, because the market is a bit immature, I guess, like there's so many different flavors of a recruitment process. So I just want to ask you like the one question: what do most studios get wrong when you are having that conversation with them when it comes to the interview process and hiring process?
I would say seeing external partnerships as only transactional. And what I mean by that is once they've got certain requirements, let's say for a new hire or a project that they are working on, is just sending that brief out, a job description, and expecting returns on it. It doesn't work that way. You will find many in the industry that will go off and do it. And it's something that you could do once you've got an established relationship and understand each other. And the second is looking for something that may not be out there. I would say the third part of it is having a clear structure in place. Who is going to interview? How long are the interviews going to be for? What exactly are you looking for? What is the need? Why are you hiring? All of these things can be discussed with one call that takes 30 to 45 minutes, which then in essence could save hours, if not weeks, if not months of your time. So having a clear structure, a process, and knowing what you want to achieve at the end of this is the one most important thing.
Can't agree more, basically. Like when I was working in recruitment, having that qualification call where you go through the job and building that relationship, I worked jobs where I didn't do that, and I don't remember them as fondly as the ones where I did do that. It's such a game changer.
Honestly, at the start of my career, if a client sent over a job, I'd jump onto it like a dog on a bone. But I learned my lessons at a very early stage, and it's about educating. I think you've got to educate people. But you can't go off and just tell a client what to do. That's not how it works. You have to explain the reasoning behind it that's going to benefit them, because essentially we all want the same outcome. Everyone wants to achieve the same outcome is what I've always believed in. So don't tell people what to do. Explain why you want to do it and what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned 3 things there, so I want to dig into some of them. The interview process, you mentioned it's important for the client to have that, I guess, predetermined and agreed on. You've seen many interview processes. What do you feel is a better interview process?
A better interview process, I would say, is one that is streamlined through speed and knowing what you want to get out of that interview process. So, for example, initial call to start the process to see if you both align. That I will always recommend. I would say, rather than formal, a little bit more informal, to talk to your candidate, get to know them, and tell them a little bit more where it's coming from the horse's mouth. So once you see that you're then aligned, you move on to a second stage. And at this point, you can dig into the technical aspects of the position. Yes, tests are still a common thing in our industry. And for certain disciplines, it could be a must to determine that. Now, the third stage after completing an interview process of technical capabilities or a test is then to round everything off. But the one thing that we come back to is speed and providing feedback for a candidate. We've come across many examples that clients do not provide feedback after an interview. Providing feedback for a candidate after their first interview then sets them up for the second stage of, number one, what to expect, but also allows them to become more engaged. So I would say providing feedback and then the speed, because sometimes you'll see after a first stage interview, you won't get feedback for 2 weeks. What happens during that period? Your candidate is less engaged and your competition are going to beat you to the best candidate. So having a streamlined process, speed, and knowing what you want is the most important thing.
Yes. When there's an interview process and you could potentially get a better read of a person, but it's going to take 5 stages in 2 months, that small extra benefit is nothing when you compare it to the amount of great talent you're going to miss out on. Correct. In those 2 months. I want to dig, you mentioned those 3 processes. I really like the first one where it's I'm guessing half an hour max, or maybe an hour if possible, if it's needed. But that's just to get to know the person, and you get to know a lot about that person, technical, soft skills, naturally anyway. And it saves everyone time. That can be like a one and done thing, right? And then you get into the technical aspects. I think that order is important. If you go straight into technical, you just miss so much, where you eventually find out on the last stage, oh, we're not a good fit. It's like, well, you have to invest a tech director and potentially a tech review all this time, which is the reason why you can't have fast interview processes, because you're putting everyone through. So I love that order. The feedback, I think, is an important it's an important part of the process. I'm realizing now, I was the conduit for all the feedback, but I pretty sure that those studios wouldn't have given the feedback to the candidate unless I asked for it and pushed for it. So did you do that as well? You gave the feedback to the candidate on the studio's behalf. Do you feel like they should be doing that on their own?
No, I think there's no 2 ways to skin a cat, as they say. So when you're in a partnership with a studio or a client, it's important that you help them do their job. Mm-hmm. So again, you're an extension of them. So if they wish to provide feedback direct, that's incredible. Now, recruitment is only a small part of their daily job in a studio. So this is where you come in to save them time. So if they are able to make notes during that interview process and provide it on an ATS, then you are always able to relay that across to them. Have I asked for the feedback? Yes, on several occasions. At times, for candidates who hadn't made it through to the next stage, it's also important to provide them feedback to see where they can further improve, where did it go wrong, and where could it be better. It's all about educating, because people are investing time into these processes. People have done their research, gone into an interview process. It could be 1, 2, 3 stages. To then not be provided feedback is disheartening. And I think it's important that we invest time in people the same way they invest time into us. So explaining that to clients about why it could help them provide feedback is an important aspect of that entire process. Let it be a negative response or a positive response. For a positive response, it then excites the candidate to want to continue that process, and it shows how keen you are on them. So, yeah.
The benefits are there.
The benefits are there for everybody.
Exactly. It just takes that extra bit of effort.
But there is an important part of the process which I want to make a note of, and that is for external partners to always provide the feedback to their clients. And what are the benefits of that? So I've always learned to have a conversation with every single one of my candidates as soon as they come out of that interview. And it helps both parties. So we can use this as an example. Someone comes out of an interview, they'd forgotten a couple of questions, which has now come to their mind. So once you're going through the interview feedback with your candidate to see how it had gone, they may have missed out a couple of questions, spare of the moment. So that then comes to their mind, which you can provide your client as feedback, because that could have been essential for them to move to the next stage. That makes all of the difference. But at the same time, they may now have questions of what is missing within this job for them. So having that 10 minutes conversation with each candidate and providing that feedback to your client then allows your client to better be prepared for the next stage. What did they like? What didn't they like? What questions they have? And what they should be prepared for the next stage. So it's essential you speak to people straight away and provide feedback to both parties. It's not just the client and it's not just about a candidate. It's a two-way thing.
Exactly. Having everyone involved, and it makes it so when the interview process is happening, it doesn't just stop as soon as the interview is done. It's like, all right, now we're going to be in the dark for a week or two. I think the 10-minute conversation, like you said, right after, and then you can async, talk with the client and the candidate. It just speeds everything along and shows the engagement. Like you said, it's just like the oil that is just making everything a lot more smoother, like the process.
It's not only making it smoother, everyone knows where they stand. And I think that's so important. Just like you just mentioned, there's been several occasions when someone will come out of an interview, the client doesn't know how that candidate feels, and the candidate doesn't know how the client feels. And 2 days go by, 3 days go by. What happens during that time? Everyone is thinking, what's going on? Where do I stand? What happens next? I think a recruiter's job is to fill in that gap. And even when there is no update that there is no update.
Yes, that is an update.
That is an update within itself. So I just think updating people, keeping everyone in the loop is one of the most important parts of that interview process.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to having that short-term versus long-term mindset. In a short-term mindset, you could save time by not doing all of these things, but they're people, and people don't just disappear after you sent them through to a role or you've interviewed them as a studio. Small world, small industry. So all of these things pay huge dividends later. Having that extra second or the extra feedback just to build that kind of relationship and the respect for their time that they've invested in the process.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think those 10 minutes of having interview feedback with someone could be the make or break of starting that entire process again, of not identifying the right
Which
person.
is months.
Look, I'll give you an example of this. During a time at my previous company, we were recruiting for an incredible mobile studio, Space Ape in London. You all know them from Boom Beach. Then they had a game called BeatStar, and most recently Chrome Valley, which has taken over the mobile industry and actually gone through the roof. So we had a lovely lady who was interviewing for us for a game designer position, and she'd got off the call, the first initial call, and she said, "This doesn't align with me. I feel like I'm going to be pigeonholed doing certain aspects of the role, and I want to do so much more than this." So during that feedback, what was our duty? Our duty was to understand what was missing. So why do you feel that it wasn't aligned? What is it exactly that you want to do in your next role? And understanding what makes them happy, what motivates them, and what's going to make this the right fit. That's not for us to push someone into something that they're not comfortable with, but understand what makes everything work. So once we'd had that conversation and that passed that back to the client, they were like, "No, I think we've actually misunderstood each other during this interview. The position is not to pigeonhole this person and do certain aspects of level design, but they'll have the opportunity to do this, this, and this." We got them onto another call within 10, 15 minutes on the same day, just to realign everything. Little did you know, it was a complete misunderstanding, and the position was exactly what they were looking for. At the end of that one move was so important for that to actually turn out on a positive and go through, where she was actually offered the role. She ended up accepting the role and moving from Spain to the UK.
Yeah, so that was a literal life-changing moment right there. Like they're moving.
Those 10 minutes.
Exactly. So I think that story explains it very well, because both parties benefited. They
Correct.
found that placement, and that all that took is that alignment, like understanding that everyone is here to have that conversation and understand each other. But when there is misunderstanding, you do not have to be in the dark or just assume. You can just have that extra jab, extra conversation, just to actually get the information across. I've seen you at work in Dubai and the way you build relationships, and I think it's one of your superpowers, the ability to just become friends with the people, and it benefits both parties. Yours, of course, because they're friends with you and it becomes a long partnership, but also them, because I feel like you understand them that much better. How do you go about becoming basically friends and building that long-term relationship with your clients and your candidates?
I actually had this conversation last week.
Amazing. So, it's fresh.
This is completely fresh to me. I was speaking to a client last week, and one of the first things that I mention to anyone that I'm speaking to is that I don't change myself as a person when I'm having a conversation. So the same way that I would speak to my wife, to my father, to my close friends and family, is exactly the same way that I would speak to a new client, to a new candidate. So yes, you can adapt and put yourself in their position, but approach people like you know them and actually be interested in their story. Everybody has a story and everyone wants to tell their story, but show a keen interest in what people do. I think as salespeople and recruiters, if you think about what you want to get out of it, it's just a one-way thing. So from the moment you meet people, get to know them, but get to know them on a personal level. Talk about their journey, their families, their work life, and find out what you could do for them. That's one of the most important aspects for me of building relationships. So I don't just go into a conversation and say, hey, have you got any jobs? Can we work together? Build a relationship at first, build a friendship, and the rest comes with it. So yes, although you're approaching it as building a friendship, when it comes to work, that's when it's game time. So for me, there's two sides of that partnership. There's the friendship side, which is vibes, like you always say, vibes, vibes, vibes. But when it comes to helping them out in their job, in their company, that's the moment you adapt and switch, because it's game time. And you've got to deliver what you've been working on for all this time.
Exactly. The vibes, I feel like, are the foundation for the work, because you've gotten to understand that person and you know what they want. I really love that frame. Like, if you're going into a conversation thinking, oh, this is what I want, so I'm going to ask questions about that. No, you want to be figuring out what they want from life, I feel, because there might be something you pick up there. It's like, oh, I can actually help them with that. I might be able to introduce them to someone. And if you're that person who's coming in, who's going to be given as much value as possible, well, your competitor isn't doing that, and your client's going to get that much better experience, and you actually have the full picture. I think, like you said, you basically pigeonhole yourself if you're going in thinking, I'm going to ask all the questions that will get me a job, let's say. But no, you're going to see them as a person first, and then the work comes later. It actually makes the work part better because you've actually got the foundation in the first place.
It goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. You don't want this to be transactional. If this becomes transactional, then you're just another recruiter. And as cliche as this sounds, people buy from people. And that will never, ever change. If you and I never liked each other, we wouldn't work with each other.
Wouldn't be here right now.
We wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be going to dinner, and we wouldn't be speaking on a daily basis. But it's even those small things that you do of giving to people. Give them insight to the industry. Share your experiences. Give them, how do I explain this? Give them things that will benefit them just from a life perspective, from the experiences that you've had that could perhaps, look, it doesn't take 5 minutes. This is from a candidate perspective. It doesn't take 5 minutes to give someone advice. It costs nothing. That person could be struggling to find their next gig, and it could all be down to their CV isn't great. They've not had the experience of putting together a good CV. So that 5 minutes could make all the difference to someone's life. And then that ties in with the building of relationships again. That person will always remember you for how you helped them at that moment. So get to know people for who they are and support people rather than thinking about what the best outcome is going to be for you.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy.
I feel like it is selfish to be selfless.
Spot on.
It's so easy to live life that way because you end up being nice and then the universe always gives back. That example you just said there, during Christmas, I did a thing where I had no calls the next week. I was like, okay, I just want to talk to some people. So I did 10 free CV reviews. Then they were all booked. I did 8. They were with candidates, gave them experience. A couple of them got jobs. I obviously felt good. But then 2 of them were actual hiring managers at big studios who just wanted a fresh up of the CV and then ended up being on the podcast. I was like, amazing. So the universe gave back. Very directly, I saw it happen, and I needed to do all 10 of those for that to happen. Obviously because I made that promise, but I got so much out of actually trying to explain to someone, because I didn't understand about the industry myself, like his perspective as a portfolio artist. I was like, I didn't actually consider that before. So I just got a lot of more insights from the industry, just giving and understanding where that person's at and trying to give as much value as you can. the universe always gives back. So I think as a recruiter, it's just number one thing. When you have that mindset, it just always works.
Everything comes full circle. And I gave an example of this recently of how one interaction over the course of 3.5 years has now become a good friend and a client. So I met with an audio lead in 2021, and our first conversation was just to get to know each other. How often is it that we get onto a call and say, how are you doing? Tell me more about you. Tell me what is going on in your life. I want to know. And that relationship blossomed from those moments. I was working on a couple of requirements for clients, for lead audio designers. Unfortunately, we didn't get the opportunity for those interview processes to turn into success and into a new role. However, we constantly kept in contact of checking in with each other every couple of weeks. How are you getting on? How is the market? How has your interviews been going? What is going wrong with them? Is there any advice that I can actually give you to help you? I don't want anything out of it. They're not even my processes. I'm probably helping another recruiter at this point. But it's just a human touch. And I think the human touch is so important. So fast forward 3.5 years of regularly speaking to each other, checking in, seeing what's going on in their life. You fast forward it to 2024. When I was starting the Pixel movement, he'd constantly be in contact with me, give me support, give me guidance, give me feedback. And there was an element of friendship and trust between us where I could give him advice, but most importantly, he could give me advice. So it was a friendship. Again, now they're in a position where a team of them have set up an incredible new business. They've got a funding of 6.9 million and are starting to work on their first game. And it's actually turned into a new client, which I'm excited to be working with. But if we go back to it, it's all about that relationship and the friendship we've built that now puts an element of trust between us of working together. So look, there's clear examples of where this can lead. And if everyone was to spend a little bit more time of asking people how they are and focusing on building a relationship, it will always come full circle.
Yeah. It's a more fun day. It's a more fun conversation. And it actually leads to better business outcomes for everyone.
Spot on.
So why not? I want to move into more nitty-gritty stuff now. So you told me you had 25 retained roles in like 4 months, if I remember right. Okay, how the hell do you actually do that? As from one recruiter to another, like how did you actually deliver on that?
Well, again, to get to a stage of a retainer, there has to be proof that you can actually deliver.
So you didn't ask for it immediately?
No, you don't. You can always, if it's a new client, to go in with the approach of can we work on a retained basis? It depends on the role that you're working on or the amount of roles. But how much trust is a client going to have within you to be able to deliver on multiple roles in your first interaction? So it was 2.5 years of actually building that relationship, building that trust with this client and getting to know the business, the projects, and who were the right people for them to be able to get them to their milestones of delivering incredible games. So it was 2.5 years of working on a contingent basis and understanding what stage the projects were at, what did they need the most, and being able to add value consistently as an external partner. So when a new project came to life and they had to deliver X amount of roles, I think it was in excess of 80 roles within 6 months. So they've got an incredible recruitment team, but they needed the additional support. So what I then did was put a case study together of what we had delivered, had a look at what they needed, which was around 25 positions. But there's got to be a win for the client at the same time. So it was about cost optimization. That was one part of it. And the second part of it was delivering the best candidates in rapid time. So we had a big briefing call with hiring managers to understand what were the requirements. Then we had a briefing call with the entire HR team to establish a process which was outside of the normal. This project was going to be running on its own, and I was responsible for running that project. So the first thing I wanted to do was I created a Slack channel for hiring managers to be there, the internal recruitment team to be in that, so we could have continuous communication. The communication was going to be key to be able to facilitate multiple interviews at any given time. So once we'd looked at those 25 roles, what I then did was figured out with the client of what the average salaries were. So once we established that a salary would be between 60 to 70,000 pounds, for example, we would then cap our fee at 65, no matter what they paid. That's just one example, which then, if it was on a contingent basis, it would cost X amount, but on a retained basis, there was a capped fee. And the outcome of that is you're reducing costs for a client. At the same time, you're delivering in rapid time. So when we looked at the difficulty of each position, I've always said accountability is very important as a recruiter. So having looked at how hard each position is, we then put an SLA into place.
What's that?
So it's a service level agreement of we will deliver and have this position filled within X amount of time.
So not sent candidates, filled. So you were confident enough to say filled in the agreement.
Filled within X amount of time.
Okay, well,
so
how did you have so much confidence that you would do that? Because you're dealing with people, right?
You're dealing with people, but having the experience of working with that client for 2.5 years, knowing exactly what their interview process is, you could then look back at all of your previous hires for each position they've hired for. So a VFX artist, one of the most sought after positions in the gaming industry, this isn't a position that you could fill in 2 weeks. It's a hard task. So we looked at the average times it took us to fill previous VFX positions with this client and said, it's going to take X amount of time to find this person in this region with this skill set. And we did that for every single one of those roles based on the previous experience that we had with the client and other case studies we've had with other clients. So that's how we come up with a time frame of delivering on each position.
So use your previous experience to use that agreement. Because I can imagine from a client's perspective, that's awesome. Like imagine having that confidence of saying, Sal's going to fill that role in 2 weeks. Great. And it's signed right there.
Correct.
But you could only do that because you had the 2.5 years of experience.
Yep.
Do you think you could get to that level with a client in less time?
Absolutely. It depends how quickly you build the relationship with the client. So it goes back to us saying if a client and yourself don't put effort into building that relationship, it will take a longer time. Mm-hmm. But look, from the offset, if you have relationships with hiring managers, with the HR team, example, the CEOs, you have access to having conversations with everyone, not to backdoor them and try and send CVs or create new opportunities, but just having those 5-10 minute conversations with hiring managers, with the HR team, you get to know each person individually. You get to know the business. You know the projects inside out. If you go to a studio, for example, you get a tour, how easier is it to then be able to go and relay their story to your candidates, to the market? For example, if you were running your studio and I spent a whole day with you in your studio, you've then given me 2 or 3 requirements, I could say, I've spent the day with Harry. I know what he's like. I've seen the studio. I've seen the team. This is who is on the team. It just makes your life easier. So to answer your question, it depends how much effort is being put into that relationship.
From the studio perspective, I just want to highlight how overpowered that is. Like when I was selling a role to a candidate and I could say, oh, I know the person who's going to be managing you on this team. I've had him on a podcast. I've met with him a couple of times for lunch. This is how he's like. Very nice person because of X, Y, Z that I've experienced personally. You would enjoy this conversation. Maybe keep this in mind during the interview. That candidate's going to be like, okay, cool. It's a different level of engagement because you got all those real aspects. And from the studio perspective, you want that. You want that experience for your candidates because you're going to get the better talent that way. And you've basically been able to give that to all candidates for that studio, which, yeah, is very powerful.
Yeah, look, how much easier is that conversation if I've turned around and said, I was at dinner with the CEO and this is what he does, this is what he's into, this is his story. I've got a great relationship with the talent team. This is how they work. This is what their process is. These are, look, if you've got previous experience of placing within that studio, these are the people that I've worked with. This is the backgrounds they've had. This is who you'd be working alongside. It's a complete different story. Mm-hmm. And I think it's always important because you're an extension of a company.
Yes, I think that's super important to be an extension and not the transactional headhunter who finds a CV, because that extension part, like the actual definition of that word, right? It's a game changer for the candidate experience as well, which is paramount to actually getting the best talent, which is what most people want.
Agreed.
Alrighty. The balance of empathy and process. You've spoken about building relationships, but when I actually think about the process of actually finding those 25 candidates in that case, that's a big process task as well. So how do you balance the empathy with the process?
How do I balance the empathy with the process? I think once you know exactly what a client wants,
so that's a checkbox.
That is one of the biggest checkpoints. I think knowing exactly what they want in each requirement then sort of minimizes the people that not minimize, but it allows you to approach the right person for the right job. And I think it's important to not waste people's time. And this isn't a numbers game of speaking to as many people as possible and then sending them to the client in the hope for the best outcome. Now, if you understand what a client wants, you reach out to the right people. So you've got the right searches in place, you're speaking to the right people, and you're actually speaking to them because you truly believe that they've got not only the characteristics, the personality, but also the technical capability of landing this position. I think it's all about quality. The empathy side still comes into it. You still treat every single person that you speak to exactly how you expect to be treated. And throughout that, you've always got to remind yourself that people are living, breathing things with emotions, and going in and understanding them, because you want to ensure, as much as they're a right fit for the client, they have to be, so the right fit for the client has to be a right fit for them, to allow them to progress in their careers, to allow them to feel at home. We spend a lot of time in our daily jobs, so the empathy side of it can never go away, is what I say.
With the empathy, you are then able to actually do that rigorous filter. I feel like you mentioned speaking to less people. It's because you're able to, because you filtered based on the empathy. And I think that answers a little bit like my question. Like I used to be, when I'm looking for a role, sometimes the description was pretty much mobile uni developer. If that's your only filter, then it will be a case of speaking to as many as possible and then having to filter on those individual calls. But I feel like the empathy and the good vibes actually have now enabled you to be able to do that filter, and then you can focus on the quality, right?
You're already doing the filter in your mind, but if you, just like you said, if you've got such a small amount of info on what you're looking for, then you're bringing people's hopes up in those conversations, and you want to have a conversation with someone that you actually believe in.
Yeah. Respect their time, your time, the client's time. It helps everyone. You need to, I think this is just like another +1 for having those qualification calls, because then you're able to do that and doing them well, which you clearly do. Like you don't want to go in there and ask questions that you could have found out from the job description. Of course, you want to get the nitty gritty. So once you get that, then you can do that rigorous filtering.
But at the same time, if you ever come across a situation when you're on a conversation, when you're having a conversation with a candidate, for example, and depending on how that conversation goes, you at certain points can have an inkling that this may not be the right position for this candidate.
What do you do? I have struggled with this. When I was 10 minutes in, I was like, I know this isn't for you.
And ultimately, you're thinking on a call, this person is not right for this, but how do I explain it to them? I always like to turn around and say, look, these are the requirements. How do you feel that aligns with your skill set? Does this align with your skill set? Have you previously done this? How would you feel if you were going to do this? Based on the conversations that I've had with my client, perhaps this may not be right, but what is your thoughts? Because who am I to judge at that point? Because I'm not a technical expert. I don't code in C++, for example. But you give someone the opportunity to answer for themselves. So I may have a thought process of this may not be right for you, but give people the opportunity. Let them know what your thoughts are, but also hear their thoughts. And then together, as a collective, you can make a decision together. So I always like to be transparent and honest with people on a call. If I don't believe that they are the right fit, I'd always want to tell them, but do it in the right way. You don't just say, look, I don't think you're right for this. Shut the phone and off we go. Give people the opportunity to explain themselves. And if at that point you still don't believe they're the right fit, then tell them, but advise what could be the right fit and help them in other ways.
Yeah, future roles. That's a big thing for me. Yeah.
Look, there is an opportunity for every single person out there, is what I believe. There is no one person that's going to be jobless for life. It doesn't work. What works for one client may not work for another client. So there's always a home for every single person, is what I believe.
I agree. This is a personal question now. It's the same question, but different context. So how do you balance the empathy part with process when it comes to building out your team? So this is when you were building out your first recruitment business and you developed a recruitment team. I'm going through that stage now where I'm working with more people. How do you balance the stuff that needs to get done, the process, with also the empathy?
Time. And what I mean by that is make time for people. Make time for people. Yes, we are there to do a job, but just like you get to know candidates and clients from a personal perspective, understand what makes those people happy. Understand what their challenges are and what they want to achieve from life. So don't hire people to work with you. I'm a massive believer of you don't get people to work for you. you build a business around people, and you build it upon trusting them and trusting these people and giving them the opportunity to be creative, to actually make mistakes and learn mistakes, breeds great leaders, is what I've always believed. But I will always make time for anyone that I've hired into my business, whether it be, just going out to check in, a 5-minute coffee break outside to say, what's going on? Not from a work perspective, but just, hey, what's going on? Tell me a little bit more. What you been up to recently? How's the family? Just get them out of that space. And it's a separate little relationship you have with people. But once we come in and we've got a job to do, we can then sit down and crack on. But always make time for people is what I believe, whether it's inside of work and outside of work. And build a relationship with people that allows them to be comfortable being able to reach out to you.
How do you build that so there is a situation where they do feel comfortable to reach out?
Got to think about this one.
Because I can feel, from speaking to you and being around you, I would feel comfortable reaching out to you, but I couldn't pinpoint the exact reason why. So why do you think that happens?
Show them that you care, Harry.
Ooh.
Show them that you actually care. Not caring about their output that's going to make you thousands and millions within a business. Show them that you care about them. And again, open a safe haven for them to be able to come to you for anything. And that's how you get the best out of people, is showing that you sincerely care about them for the right reasons. And look, I got into business for certain things. I built my first business, which was a successful business, and there were certain things that I wanted to get out of it. I'll tell you what those things were. It was, yes, to provide stability for my family, to be the best at what I was doing. But I was once given an opportunity to make a difference in my life for my family and for myself. Now, the biggest goal for me was to actually be able to give that opportunity to the people that I hired.
Yeah.
For them to be able to change their life for the better. And if I was able to give 5% of that, of what I learned, and give them an opportunity to make that change in their life for the better, whether it be from a learning perspective, whether that be from a career perspective or from a monetization perspective of bringing stability to their lives, then I won. And that's how I measured my success, and that's how I opened up the gates for them to come to me about anything and everything. Be a friend, care, and just be honest with people.
Perfect. I want to ask you about the current state of the industry. There's a lot of recruiters out at the moment up to work in the games industry, and there might be some aspiring to do recruitment in the games industry. What advice would you give to them?
For those that are in the industry, the best advice I can give to anyone is continue doing those micro tasks that most run away from. And the other pieces of advice I could give is always be honest and always update people. Build relationships and show that you care about what you're doing. Share your story, but most importantly, get to know people for who they are and give them all the support possible.
So if I'm in the industry now, that is, just want to second that, like being honest, because then that's actually allows you to be long-term in the industry. You can't be honest. You can't be dishonest for that long.
Just do the right thing.
Yeah. What if you don't have a job yet? Or if you used to have a job and you can't do those micro tasks anymore? What would you recommend for them to actually get the job? Would you recommend them to post on LinkedIn, or what would you do in that situation?
I've had a couple of these conversations recently, and I've got some friends and colleagues that are recruiters within the gaming industry that have been outside of work for a long time now, you'll find that in a competitive market where there's been so many layoffs, your competition is going to be fierce. And for someone that's inexperienced about applying for work, they will go and click on a job on LinkedIn and apply. You've got to remember that there's probably another 100 or 200 of you that are out there doing the same thing. So how do you differentiate yourself from that? So I think the biggest start would be to have a polished LinkedIn. And if you don't have so, then reach out to someone within your network. For example, I could use myself or you for this, to say, what do you think about my LinkedIn? What could I improve? Turn to friends, turn to colleagues. Start off by improving your CV, your LinkedIn profile. But every time you actually apply for work, go that little bit deeper. Who actually posted this job? See if you can identify that person, connect with them, and try and build out a relationship and give them a reason to want to speak to you. If you're applying to X company, try and connect with people within that company, find mutual connections. But my go-to with everything is speak to your network, utilize your network, because a friend of a friend is a friend that may know of something that's not out there. So connect with as many people as possible, speak to everyone, utilize your network, and just go above and beyond rather than clicking apply. But the most important thing is you will get many rejections and you are not alone, and you've got to keep going. So looking for a job is a job within itself. I've always learned that. Just have as many conversations as possible and keep going.
Yeah, those conversations are super important, especially the point you made about friends of a friend. Like having one conversation could potentially mean you've now in the brain space of 400, 500 people, because anytime that person might think of a role, they can then tell you. But also all their friends, whenever they think of a role and they get whiff of it, then you could potentially know. So that's why having those 20, 30 conversations, you've now plugged yourself into so many networks. And yeah, can't second the LinkedIn refresh enough, because that is the first impression of everyone who, once you do get attention or you do speak to someone, you need that to be optimized. And there's a few people on Amir Satvat's website. He's got a few that I recommend, or you can reach out to me or Sel potentially, just for a few tips. How about for gaming professionals who are out of work now? What advice would you give for a gaming professional out of work now?
Gaming professionals. So we've seen tons and tons of resources that are out on the market. And I think the first go-to place is Amir. And there's plenty of resources which people outside of work can utilize. But there's also gaming recruitment specialists, just like myself, to reach out to, where if I'm not hiring a particular role, I could then put you in contact with people I may know, or tell you the clients that I'm working with that are not hiring for positions perhaps within your field at this moment, but allow you to build relationships with those clients. I think the first go-to place would be the resources that are online on LinkedIn. Try and get involved with the community as much as possible, but then build relationships with external partners just like myself.
Yeah, build the relationship with the recruiters, the external ones. Overpowered. I've had a couple of people ask me over the couple of years, like, can you give me a lay of the land? And I can then tell them, all right, these companies are hiring, these companies pretty much don't bother, and only a few people have done that. So imagine how few people are actually doing that. So you have that extra edge. And there are plenty of external recruiters who will give you that answer. Not all of them will, but some will, where it's worth it. There you go.
Some will. Look, I had a conversation recently where this candidate didn't even know about the resources that was available within the gaming community. And some of the clients that I've had relationships with over the years, which is 25 different studios, although I'm not actively working with some of those right now, I was able to provide that list to this candidate to then go and check out those clients and build relationships perhaps with the recruitment team or the hiring managers, or even just have a browse of their websites to see what comes up. Look, I think what else you can do is put notifications on every single one of the studios that you want to be a part of. Draw up a big list, put notifications, and look when people are hiring, because you want to be first in. You've got to be proactive.
Yeah. You want to make finding the job a game. I think you want to gamify it, have a little spreadsheet, make everything kind of, the notifications is key. And it might feel like nothing's happening until you get the job, but you are doing things. So like improving that list is a checkbox task. I think that's really healthy for the mental aspect of feeling like when you've woken up and you've done some work, you've actually contributed to your job search.
Yeah.
And you can actually document that. So I think, being organised with that spreadsheet, just for that sense of progress, is really important as well.
Agreed.
Amazing. The pixel movement has a cool feature, right? Could you tell me more about that?
So the coolest feature about the pixel movement is the well-being aspect of it, and how the well-being aspect works of the pixel movement. Having seen what the industry has gone through and seeing people that are looking for work and how much of a toll it can take on their mental welfare. Some people out outside of work for 3-6 months, and applying for work and going through interview processes can take a toll on its mind. I've been there myself. So what I wanted to do was introduce something that goes beyond the norm of supporting people. So with every successful placement fee, we provide £150 worth of well-being vouchers to both the candidate and the client. And how that essentially works is, once you've gone through an interview process with the pixel movement and successfully secured your new home, your new job, we would then provide £150 worth of vouchers, which you can put towards your well-being. And this could be to go out with your partner or with kids, to a yoga session, a course in a different language. Just go out and do something for you after going through such a period of applying for work or being outside of work. So I just thought that, how can I level up in terms of supporting people beyond just finding their next job, really?
Yeah. So you get the win of finding a new job and making that new hire, and then you also have the treat as well, which is like super nice.
Yeah, look, many companies have got well-being schemes, and I myself had a well-being scheme at the business, my previous business. But we get so caught up in working. How often do we actually utilize that? Even with private healthcare or whatever it is, there's gym memberships there, and there's physiotherapy or mental health sessions. But how often are we pushed to go and actually do that through our own back? So if there is someone there that says, hey, I've got £150 voucher for you to go and do something for you, and I want you to do that for you. It was just a different way of approaching recruitment and just supporting people.
Amazing. No, I when you first told me, I found it very, very cool. It makes so much sense. So yeah, really cool feature.
Yep.
Where can people go to find more about you and the Pixel Movement?
So first and foremost, LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me, connect with me. And website is in the works now. It should be with us in the next couple of weeks. So by any means, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah,
check out Sell on LinkedIn. And you also post as well recently, which is really cool to hear. Not that many recruitment founders post as regularly, so it's really cool seeing you post more as well and seeing you build in public.
It's all thanks to you.
Yeah, but it's good. I've had many of those conversations, and not everyone actually follows through. So
yeah,
I don't get all the credit.
It's a hard task to follow through, but look, keep a journal. I think Ali Farha mentioned it today. He said, keep a journal of absolutely everything that you do, and there's a life lesson in everything.
It really is, yeah.
In every moment of your day, whether it be work or personal life, try and resonate with it and come up with an idea to post about something. but the quality is important. The quality of what you're getting out has to be important. Don't post for the sake of posting.
Yeah.
So I try to post once, twice a week. Once the very minimum, twice is where I want to be. The rest of the time is head down, doing what I do best.
Amazing. So, thank you so much.
Welcome, man. It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure.